Have you ever discovered that everyone you know received an invitation to something important? Except you? The pain cuts deeper when it's your own sister's wedding, and you find out by accident through a social media post. I'm Rebecca, but everyone calls me Becca. I'm 34 years old, a single mom to my incredible 9-year-old daughter Maya, and this is the story of how my little girl taught an entire wedding full of adults what family loyalty really means. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun streamed through the windows of our small apartment in downtown Riverside as I scrolled through my phone, sipping my second cup of coffee before my shift at Café Luna. Maya was at the kitchen table, her art supplies spread everywhere, as she worked on another one of her detailed drawings. She had this incredible talent for capturing emotions in her sketches, something that always amazed me about my daughter. That's when I saw it. A photo posted by my cousin Jennifer, showing off her elegant cream-colored invitation with gold lettering. The caption read, "So excited for Victoria's big day next month. Can't wait to celebrate at Emerald Gardens Estate." My heart stopped. Victoria. My sister Victoria was getting married, and apparently everyone in our extended family had received invitations except me. I stared at the phone screen, reading the post over and over, hoping I had misunderstood something. But there it was, clear as day. My younger sister's wedding invitation, posted for the world to see, while I sat in my tiny apartment having heard absolutely nothing about it. The coffee in my mouth turned bitter as the reality sank in. Maya looked up from her drawing, her dark eyes concerned. "Mommy, are you okay? You look sad." I quickly forced a smile and set down my phone. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just reading something boring for work." But inside, I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. How do you explain to a 9-year-old that her aunt apparently didn't think she and her mother were important enough to invite to one of the most significant days of her life? My sister Victoria and I had always had a complicated relationship, but I never imagined it had deteriorated to this level. She was 6 years younger than me, born when I was already in elementary school and starting to understand family dynamics. From the moment she arrived, Victoria seemed to possess some magical quality that drew everyone's attention and admiration. She was the baby, the princess, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. When I became pregnant with Maya at 25, unmarried and struggling to finish my graphic design degree, my family's disappointment was palpable. My mother, Patricia, spent months making comments about poor choices and difficult situations, while my father, Robert, simply grew more distant. Victoria, meanwhile, was living her best life in Newport Beach, working as a successful real estate agent and posting pictures of her glamorous lifestyle all over social media. But despite everything, I had always tried to maintain a relationship with my sister. When Maya was born, Victoria had seemed genuinely excited about becoming an aunt. She would visit occasionally, bringing expensive gifts and taking selfies with Maya that she'd post online. "My gorgeous niece," she would caption them. And for a while, I thought maybe our relationship was improving. As Maya grew older, though, Victoria's visits became less frequent. She was always busy with work, or traveling, or dealing with some drama in her social circle. When she started dating Christopher 2 years ago, a successful lawyer from Orange County, her availability for family time decreased even further. She would show up to holiday gatherings for an hour or two, take photos, and then disappear to more exciting obligations. I should have seen the signs. Last Christmas at our parents' house in Orange County, Victoria had spent most of the day on her phone, coordinating with wedding planners and vendors. I heard her talking to Christopher about keeping the guest list manageable and making sure the aesthetic wasn't compromised. At the time, I assumed she was just being particular about her special day. I never imagined that Maya and I weren't even on the preliminary list. The months leading up to what I now knew was Victoria's wedding had been filled with subtle hints that something big was being planned. My mother, Patricia, would mention helping Victoria with some decisions or running errands for an important event. When I would ask for details, Mom would brush me off with vague responses about just family stuff or nothing you need to worry about. I had convinced myself that maybe they were planning a surprise party for someone, or that Victoria was involved in organizing an event for one of her wealthy clients. The possibility that my own sister was planning her wedding without including me never seriously crossed my mind. Even during our most difficult periods, we were still family. We still shared the same childhood memories, the same parents, the same last name. Maya had always adored her Aunt Vicky, as she called her. Despite Victoria's increasing absence from our lives, Maya would light up whenever she saw her. She would spend hours drawing pictures for Victoria, carefully selecting colors and adding details that she thought would make her aunt smile. Maya had this pure, innocent love for family members that hadn't been tainted by years of disappointment and hurt feelings. Just last month, Maya had created an elaborate drawing of her, Victoria, and me at the beach, complete with seashells and a sunset that she had spent 3 days perfecting. She had been so excited to give it to Victoria the next time she visited. But Victoria never came. She had canceled the last 2 family dinners with last-minute excuses about work emergencies or prior commitments. Now, sitting in my kitchen with the evidence of my exclusion glowing on my phone screen, I felt every small slight and dismissal from the past few years coalescing into one massive realization. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I wasn't just being paranoid or overly sensitive. My family really had been systematically excluding me from something huge, something that should have included me by default. I picked up my phone and scrolled through more posts. Jennifer's wasn't the only one. My cousin Mark had posted a photo of his invitation yesterday. My childhood friend Sarah, who I hadn't spoken to in months but who had somehow maintained a relationship with Victoria, had shared a story about shopping for a dress for the most beautiful wedding of the year. Even Mrs. Henderson from down the street, whom Victoria had met exactly twice, had received an invitation. The graphic designer in me couldn't help but notice how beautiful the invitations were. Cream cardstock with gold foil lettering, delicate floral watercolor borders, elegant typography. Victoria had always had excellent taste, and clearly no expense had been spared for her special day. The invitations probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, which made their absence from my mailbox sting even more. I thought about calling my mother to ask what was going on, but a part of me already knew what she would say. Patricia had perfected the art of making hurtful situations sound reasonable and inevitable. She would probably tell me that the wedding was very small, or that they didn't want to burden me with the expense of attending, or some other explanation that was technically considerate but felt like a knife to the heart. Maya's voice interrupted my spiraling thoughts. "Mommy, I finished my picture. Do you want to see?" She held up her latest creation, a drawing of a family standing together in front of a house with flowers. The figures were holding hands, and there were hearts floating above their heads. "It's us with Aunt Vicky and Grandma and Grandpa," she explained proudly. "We're all together for a celebration." Looking at Maya's innocent artwork, I felt tears prick my eyes. Here was my daughter, creating images of family unity and love, while the actual family was busy planning celebrations that didn't include us. How was I supposed to explain this to her? How was I supposed to maintain her faith in family bonds when those bonds apparently didn't extend to us? I pulled Maya onto my lap and hugged her tight, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "It's beautiful, baby. You're such a talented artist." She beamed at the praise, completely unaware of the storm of emotions churning inside me. Maya's innocence and optimism were precious gifts that I was determined to protect, even if it meant swallowing my own hurt and disappointment. The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine activities that felt surreal against the backdrop of my discovery. I went to work at the cafe, smiling at customers and making small talk while internally processing the magnitude of my family's betrayal. Every time someone mentioned weekend plans or upcoming events, I thought about the wedding that I wouldn't be attending, the celebration of my sister's happiness that apparently didn't require my presence. That evening, after Maya had gone to bed, I sat alone in my living room with my laptop, trying to focus on a freelance graphic design project, but finding myself distracted by questions that had no satisfying answers. Why had Victoria chosen to exclude me? Was it something I had done? Or was it simply that my life as a struggling single mother didn't fit the aesthetic she wanted for her perfect day? I thought about all the times I had supported Victoria over the years. When she was in high school and having friend drama, I was the one she called crying at midnight. When she failed her real estate licensing exam the first time, I spent hours helping her study for the retake. When her first serious boyfriend cheated on her, I drove to Newport Beach at 2 a.m. to bring her ice cream and tissues. But somewhere along the way, my role in Victoria's life had shifted from supportive big sister to embarrassing reminder of a different kind of existence. My small apartment, my secondhand car, my struggles with single motherhood, these things didn't align with the Instagram perfect life that Victoria had cultivated. Maybe inviting me would have required her to acknowledge that her family wasn't as picture-perfect as she liked to pretend. The irony wasn't lost on me that I spent my days creating beautiful designs for other people's special events while being excluded from my own sisters. I had designed wedding invitations, baby shower announcements, and graduation party flyers for dozens of clients, always taking pride in creating something that would help them celebrate their joy with the people they loved. Now I was on the receiving end of that careful curation, deemed unworthy of inclusion in my sister's vision of her perfect day. As I finally closed my laptop and prepared for bed, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront Victoria directly. I wouldn't call my parents demanding explanations. I wouldn't allow their choices to poison Maya's innocent love for her family. Instead, I would continue being the bigger person, just as I always had. I would protect my daughter from this disappointment and find a way to move forward without letting their rejection define my worth. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling and listening to Maya's peaceful breathing from the next room, I couldn't shake the feeling that this situation was far from over. Maya had a way of seeing injustice clearly and responding to it with a directness that adults had long since abandoned. If she found out about Victoria's wedding and our exclusion from it, I had a feeling that her reaction would be very different from my own resigned acceptance. Little did I know that my daughter's sense of justice and loyalty would soon create a moment that would change our family forever. Sometimes the smallest people in our lives are the ones with the biggest hearts and the clearest vision of what family should really mean. 3 weeks passed before I found out the devastating truth behind Victoria's perfect wedding plans. It was Maya who accidentally uncovered the full extent of our exclusion, and her discovery came in the most innocent way possible. We were at Target, shopping for new school supplies when Maya spotted Mrs. Chen from her art class near the greeting card section. Maya had always been social, and she immediately ran over to say hello to her favorite teacher. I followed behind, listening as Maya excitedly told Mrs. Chen about her latest drawings and her plans for the weekend. "Oh, Maya," Mrs. Chen said with genuine warmth, "I saw your grandmother Patricia at the grocery store yesterday. She was so excited about your aunt's wedding next weekend. She showed me pictures of the venue on her phone. Emerald Gardens estate looks absolutely stunning with all those white roses and eucalyptus arrangements." My blood ran cold. Next weekend. The wedding was next weekend, and I was hearing about it from my daughter's art teacher in the middle of Target. Maya looked up at me with confusion written across her face. "Mommy, what wedding? Are we going to Aunt Vicky's wedding?" I forced what I hoped looked like a natural smile while my heart shattered into pieces. "We'll talk about it later, sweetheart," I managed to say, my voice surprisingly steady. Mrs. Chen seemed to realize she had stepped into something uncomfortable, and she quickly made an excuse about needing to find her husband and hurried away. The drive home was torture. Maya kept asking questions about the wedding, wondering why she hadn't heard about it before, asking if she could wear her pretty blue dress that she saved for special occasions. Each question felt like another nail in the coffin of my illusions about our family relationships. I had been hoping against hope that maybe the social media posts were about some distant future event, that there was still time for an invitation to arrive, that somehow this was all a misunderstanding. But next weekend meant that save the date. Cards had been sent months ago. It meant that RSVPs had been collected, final headcounts given to caterers, seating charts finalized. It meant that Victoria had been planning this wedding for the better part of a year, all while looking me in the eye at family gatherings and never mentioning it once. That evening, after Maya had gone to bed still asking questions about Aunt Yi. Vicky's wedding, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my mother directly, determined to get answers regardless of how uncomfortable the conversation might become. "Hi, Mom, it's Becca," I said when Patricia answered on the third ring. "Oh, hello, dear. This is a surprise. You usually text." Her voice already sounded guarded, which told me everything I needed to know about her awareness of the situation. "Mom, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to give me an honest answer." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was coming. "Is Victoria getting married next weekend?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Patricia cleared her throat. "Becca, this is complicated. It's actually very simple, Mom. Either my sister is getting married next weekend or she isn't." "Which is it?" "Yes, she is, but honey, you have to understand. When were you planning to tell me? Or were you planning to tell me at all?" My voice was sharper than I intended, but I was past the point of polite pretense. Patricia sighed heavily, the way she always did when she was about to deliver news she knew would hurt but felt justified in delivering anyway. Victoria wanted to keep the wedding very small and intimate, just immediate family and very close friends. She felt that with your financial situation, it would be unfair to put you in a position where you felt obligated to buy a gift or dress up for something so expensive. The explanation hit me like a physical blow. "So you decided for me that I couldn't afford to celebrate my own sister's wedding?" "It's not that simple, Rebecca. You know how Victoria is about these things. She has a very specific vision for her day, and she didn't want anything to detract from that. She was worried that having Maya there might be disruptive, and she knew you wouldn't come without her." There it was, the truth I had been dreading but somehow already knew. Maya, my beautiful, artistic, well-behaved daughter, was seen as a disruption to Victoria's perfect aesthetic, and I, by extension, was an embarrassment that needed to be managed rather than celebrated. Maya is 9 years old, Mom. She's not some uncontrollable toddler. She's never been disruptive at any family event. I know, sweetheart, but you know how these formal events can be. Victoria just wanted everything to be perfect, and she thought it would be easier for everyone if the guest list was kept very focused. Everyone except me and Maya, apparently. Patricia's voice took on that defensive tone she used whenever she was protecting Victoria from criticism. "This isn't about you, Becca. This is Victoria's day, and she has the right to celebrate it however she wants. You're being dramatic about this." The word dramatic felt like a slap across the face. I had spent my entire adult life being the opposite of dramatic. I was the one who quietly absorbed disappointments, who never made scenes, who always put other people's comfort ahead of my own feelings. But apparently, even asking why I wasn't invited to my sister's wedding was considered excessive emotion. "Does Maya know?" I asked, changing tactics. "Does she know that her Aunt Vicky is getting married and didn't invite us?" "Of course not. Why would we tell her something that would only upset her?" "Because she found out anyway, Mom. Mrs. Chen mentioned it at Target today, And now Maya is confused and hurt because she doesn't understand why we're not going to celebrate with family. There was another long pause. When Patricia spoke again, her voice was smaller, less certain. I'm sorry, Becca. I really am. This wasn't my decision to make. But you went along with it. You helped plan a wedding for one daughter while deliberately excluding the other daughter and your only grandchild. How is that not your decision? I didn't want to cause problems between you girls. Victoria was so stressed about the planning, and she seemed to have such clear ideas about what she wanted. I thought it was better to support her vision than to create family drama. Family drama. As if wanting to be included in my sister's wedding was some kind of unreasonable demand that would destroy the family peace. As if I was the problem for feeling hurt, rather than Victoria being the problem for excluding me. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen feeling more alone than I had in years. The conversation had confirmed every fear I'd had about my place in the family hierarchy. I wasn't just overlooked or forgotten. I was actively excluded because my presence was seen as incompatible with the image Victoria wanted to project. I thought about all the times I had rearranged my schedule to help Victoria with her problems. When she was house hunting 2 years ago, I had spent 3 Saturdays driving around Orange County with her and Maya, looking at properties and listening to her endless requirements for the perfect home. Maya had been so good during those long days, quietly drawing in her sketchbook while Victoria and the realtor discussed square footage and school districts. When Victoria finally found her condo in Newport Beach, she had been so excited to show it off. She invited the whole family for a housewarming party, posting pictures of the elegant space with its ocean views and designer furniture. Maya had drawn her a picture of the condo that day, complete with the palm trees visible from Victoria's balcony. Victoria had hung it on her refrigerator and called Maya the family artist. But apparently, that same little artist was now too disruptive to witness Victoria's wedding ceremony. I remembered another incident from 6 months ago when Victoria had called me in tears because a major real estate deal had fallen through at the last minute. She was devastated, worried about her commission and her reputation with the agency. I had driven to Newport Beach that night with Maya in tow, bringing Chinese takeout and spending hours listening to Victoria vent about difficult clients and unrealistic expectations. Maya had been perfect that night, quietly coloring while Victoria and I talked. When Victoria finally calmed down, she had noticed Maya's drawing and asked what she was working on. Maya had shown her a picture of a house with a sold sign in front of it, and "Congratulations, Aunt Vicky," written in careful block letters across the bottom. "I drew it for your next sale," Maya had explained shyly. "So you won't be sad anymore." Victoria had actually cried when she saw the drawing. She hugged Maya tight and told her she was the sweetest niece in the world. She promised to hang the picture in her office as inspiration for future deals. That was the Victoria I remembered. The sister who could be touched by a child's kindness and generosity. What had happened to that person? When had Maya transformed from the sweet niece who created art to inspire her aunt into a potential disruption who needed to be excluded from important events? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the change had been gradual, but persistent. Victoria's visits had become shorter and more focused on taking photos for social media rather than actually spending time with us. She would arrive with a specific agenda, pose for pictures that showed her being a fun aunt, and then leave as quickly as possible. Last Christmas, Victoria had spent 20 minutes taking selfies with Maya under the Christmas tree, directing her to smile and look festive for the camera. But when Maya tried to show Victoria the advent calendar she had made by hand, complete with tiny drawings for each day, Victoria had barely glanced at it before getting distracted by a phone call from Christopher. Maya had noticed the dismissal, though she hadn't said anything at the time. That night, she had asked me if Aunt Vicky was okay because she seemed like she was in a hurry to leave. I had made excuses about Victoria being busy with work, but even then, I could see that Maya was starting to understand that her aunt's attention was conditional and performative. Now, facing the reality of our complete exclusion from Victoria's wedding, I had to accept that my efforts to maintain family relationships had been largely one-sided. I had been so focused on being the reliable sister, the one who always showed up and offered support, that I had failed to notice that Victoria had already emotionally checked out of our relationship. The hardest part was knowing that I would have to explain this to Maya in a way that didn't completely destroy her faith in family love. How do you tell a 9-year-old that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally make choices that suggest your love isn't valued or wanted? Maya had already started asking more specific questions about the wedding. She wanted to know what dress Aunt Vicky would wear, whether there would be flowers like in the movies, and if she could bring her new set of colored pencils to draw pictures at the reception. Each question broke my heart a little more because I could see how excited she was about the possibility of celebrating with family. I decided that I needed to tell Maya the truth, but in a way that protected her from feeling personally rejected. The next morning over breakfast, I brought up the subject as gently as I could. Maya, remember what Mrs. Chen said about Aunt Vicky's wedding? She looked up from her cereal, nodding eagerly. Yes. Are we going? Can I wear my blue dress? Well, sweetheart, it turns out that Aunt Vicky decided to have a very small wedding with just a few people. Sometimes adults make decisions about their special days that don't include everyone they love. Maya's face fell slightly, but she seemed to be processing the information. But we're family. Don't families go to weddings together? Usually they do, baby. But sometimes things are complicated, and adults make choices that might not make sense to us. Did we do something wrong? The question was asked in such a small voice that it nearly broke my resolve to handle this calmly. No, Maya, we didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes people make decisions based on things that have nothing to do with us. It doesn't mean they don't love us. But even as I said the words, I wasn't sure I believed them myself. How could excluding your sister and niece from your wedding be anything other than a clear statement about the value you place on those relationships? Maya was quiet for the rest of breakfast, but I could see her mind working. She had always been perceptive about adult emotions and situations, even when she didn't fully understand them. I worried about what conclusions she might be drawing about our family dynamics. That afternoon, while I was working on a client project, Maya came and sat beside me with her sketchbook. Without saying anything, she began drawing with intense concentration. When she finished, she showed me the picture. It was a wedding scene with a bride and groom at an altar, surrounded by empty chairs. Off to the side, she had drawn 2 figures, holding hands, watching from a distance. It's Aunt Vicky's wedding, she explained matter-of-factly. And that's us, watching because we love her even when she doesn't invite us. The simple honesty of her interpretation left me speechless. In her child's understanding, love didn't depend on reciprocation or inclusion. Love meant caring about someone's happiness, even when that person hurt your feelings. It was a lesson in grace that I wasn't sure I was mature enough to fully embrace. Looking at Maya's drawing, I realized that my daughter had a clearer understanding of unconditional love than most of the adults in our family. She saw the situation for what it was, felt the hurt of exclusion, but still chose to focus on celebrating Victoria's happiness rather than dwelling on the rejection. But I also knew that Maya's generous heart deserved better than being taken for granted by people who should cherish it. As I watched her carefully color in the details of her drawing, adding flowers and hearts to make the wedding scene beautiful, I felt a surge of protective anger that I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. My daughter was creating art to honor a person who had deemed her presence unworthy of inclusion in an important family event. The unfairness of it was staggering, and for the first time since discovering Victoria's wedding plans, I allowed myself to feel genuinely angry rather than just hurt and disappointed. Maya deserved family members who celebrated her artistic talents, who looked forward to her presence at special events, who saw her enthusiasm and creativity as gifts rather than Potential disruptions. She deserved better than being excluded from family celebrations because she didn't fit someone else's aesthetic vision. As the week progressed toward Victoria's wedding weekend, I found myself oscillating between sadness and anger, between wanting to protect Maya from the hurt and wanting her to understand that she deserved better treatment from the people who claimed to love her. Little did I know that Maya was developing her own understanding of the situation, and her response would be far more direct and powerful than anything I could have imagined. Sometimes children see injustice more clearly than adults because they haven't yet learned to accept unfairness as normal or inevitable. The weekend of Victoria's wedding arrived with typical Southern California sunshine, the kind of perfect weather that would make for stunning outdoor ceremony photos at Emerald Gardens Estate. I tried to keep Maya busy with activities that would distract her from thinking about the celebration we weren't attending, but she seemed unusually quiet and thoughtful. Saturday morning, as I was making breakfast, Maya announced that she had been working on something special all week. She had been spending extra time in her room after dinner, and I had assumed she was just drawing or reading like she usually did. But when she brought out her latest creation, I realized she had been working on something much more significant. It was a large poster board, carefully divided into sections, each containing a detailed drawing with accompanying text in her neat handwriting. The title across the top read, "Why Families Should Stay Together," and each section showed different scenes of family love and support. There was a drawing of herself and Victoria baking cookies together during one of Victoria's rare visits, with the caption, "Family teaches us new things." Another section showed Victoria crying after her breakup with her previous boyfriend, with me comforting her, labeled, "Family helps when we're sad." A third drawing depicted our last Christmas together, everyone laughing around the dinner table, titled, "Family Makes Holidays Special." The final section was the most heartbreaking. It showed Maya holding up one of her drawings to show Victoria, with Victoria looking at her phone instead of paying attention. The caption read, "Sometimes family forgets to listen, but we love them anyway." "I made this for Aunt Vicky," Maya explained with serious determination. "I think she forgot why families are important. Maybe if she sees this, she'll remember." Looking at my daughter's earnest face and her carefully crafted reminder about family values, I felt a complex mix of pride and heartbreak. Pride because Maya had responded to rejection with love and creativity, trying to educate rather than retaliate. Heartbreak because no 9-year-old should have to create visual aids to remind adults about the importance of family inclusion. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," I managed to say. "But you know we're not going to see Aunt Vicky today because she's at her wedding." Maya's expression didn't change. "I know, Mommy, but sometimes important things can't wait for convenient times." Or, there was something in her tone that made me look at her more carefully. Maya had inherited my stubborn streak, but she had also developed a sense of justice that was entirely her own. When she believed something was right, she pursued it with a determination that could be both admirable and concerning in a child her age. "What are you thinking, Maya?" "I'm thinking that maybe Aunt Vicky needs to see this today, when she's making promises about family. Maybe it's the most important day for her to remember what family really means." The logic was sound, even if the practical implications were impossible. How could we deliver Maya's message to Victoria on her wedding day when we weren't even invited to attend? But looking at my daughter's hopeful face, I realized that this was about more than just delivering a poster. This was about Maya's need to believe that love and effort could bridge any gap, that sincerity could overcome rejection. I spent the rest of the morning trying to distract Maya from her mission, while also admiring her determination to fight for family relationships that the adults had apparently given up on. Her faith in the power of love and communication was both inspiring and naive, and I wasn't sure whether to encourage it or protect her from the inevitable disappointment. But Maya had already made up her mind about what needed to happen, and I was about to learn that when my daughter decided something was important, she found a way to make it happen, regardless of adult obstacles or social conventions. I had spent years telling myself stories to make Victoria's behavior seem reasonable. When she would cancel family dinners at the last minute, I convinced myself she was just overwhelmed with work pressures in the competitive real estate market. When she would visit for holidays but spend most of the time on her phone coordinating with friends or clients, I told myself that success required constant attention to business relationships. When she would post elaborate social media content about her glamorous lifestyle while rarely asking about my own life, I rationalized that some people just weren't natural communicators about personal matters. The mental gymnastics I performed to excuse Victoria's gradual withdrawal from our relationship were exhausting in retrospect. I had become an expert at finding alternative explanations for behavior that, if it came from anyone else, I would have recognized as dismissive and self-centered. But Victoria was family, and I had been raised to believe that family relationships required patience, understanding, and endless second chances. My mother, Patricia, had always emphasized the importance of maintaining harmony within the family unit. Growing up, whenever Victoria and I had conflicts, I was the one expected to be mature and accommodating. "She's younger than you, Rebecca," Mom would say. "You need to be the bigger person here." This dynamic had persisted well into our adult years, with me constantly adjusting my expectations and behavior to accommodate Victoria's moods and priorities. When Victoria started dating Christopher, I initially felt hopeful that a serious relationship might ground her and help her appreciate the value of committed family bonds. Christopher seemed like a stable, successful man who came from a close-knit family himself. I thought perhaps his influence would remind Victoria of the importance of maintaining strong sibling relationships. Instead, dating Christopher seemed to accelerate Victoria's transformation into someone I barely recognized. She began adopting the social customs and expectations of his wealthy family and friend group, where appearances and social status carried enormous weight. The casual, unpretentious family gatherings that had been our tradition suddenly seemed beneath her newly elevated standards. I remember the first time Victoria brought Christopher to a family barbecue at our parents' house. Maya was 7 then, and she had been so excited to meet Aunt Vicky's new boyfriend. She had spent the afternoon before making a welcome card for him, complete with her characteristic detailed drawings and a heartfelt message about being glad he made Aunt Vicky happy. Christopher was polite enough, but I could see him taking, in the modest suburban setting, the paper plates and plastic chairs, the simple backyard decorations that my father had put up with obvious pride. Victoria seemed embarrassed by details that had never bothered her before. She kept apologizing for various aspects of the gathering, as if our family's middle-class lifestyle was something shameful that needed explanation. Maya had approached Christopher with her usual open-hearted enthusiasm, eager to show him her card and tell him about her art classes. But Christopher's response was politely distant, the kind of perfunctory acknowledgement adults give to children when they're not genuinely interested but know they should make an effort. Victoria didn't even notice that Maya's feelings were hurt by his lukewarm reaction to her gift. That day marked the beginning of a subtle but persistent shift in Victoria's behavior around family events. She started arriving later and leaving earlier. She would spend increasing amounts of time discussing her new social circle, dropping names of wealthy clients and exclusive events, as if to establish her distance from our more ordinary circumstances. Maya noticed the change before I did. Children have an uncanny ability to detect authenticity, and she began asking me why Aunt Vicky seemed different during visits. "She used to look at my drawings for a long time," Maya observed one day after Victoria had briefly glanced at her latest artwork, before immediately turning her attention to her phone. "Now she just says they're nice and then looks away." I had made excuses for Victoria then, explaining that adults sometimes got distracted by work responsibilities and that it didn't mean she cared any less about Maya's artistic talents. But even as I spoke the words, I could see that Maya wasn't entirely convinced by my explanations. Her faith in adult relationships was beginning to develop the same protective skepticism that I had been trying to avoid. The engagement announcement had come through a group text message, accompanied by a professional photograph of Victoria's enormous diamond ring. There was no personal call to share the exciting news, no invitation for Maya and me to celebrate, with lunch or dinner. Just a mass notification that felt more like a press release than a family announcement. I had responded with enthusiastic congratulations, offering to help with wedding planning in any way that would be useful. Victoria's response had been a generic, "Thanks, it's going to be crazy busy, but so exciting," followed by radio silence. For weeks. When I followed up with specific offers to help with addressing invitations, coordinating with vendors, or managing any other tasks that might lighten her load, my messages went unanswered. Maya had been thrilled about the prospect of Aunt Vicky getting married. She immediately began planning her outfit for the wedding, practicing how she would congratulate Uncle Christopher, and creating elaborate drawings of wedding ceremonies complete with flowers, music, and dancing. Her excitement was infectious, and I found myself getting caught up in her enthusiasm, despite Victoria's lack of communication about the actual plans. As months passed without any information about the wedding details, I began to suspect that perhaps Victoria was planning a destination wedding or an elopement that wouldn't include extended family. I prepared myself for disappointment, but assumed that at minimum, we would receive notification about whatever celebration they chose, even if we couldn't attend due to logistics or expense. The possibility that we simply wouldn't be invited at all had never seriously entered my mind. Even during our most difficult periods, Victoria had always included us in major life events. When she bought her condo, she had insisted on giving us a tour. When she received a major promotion at work, she had called to share the news personally. When she adopted her cat Snowball, she had brought him to meet Maya because she knew how much my daughter loved animals. But this wedding represented something different. This was Victoria's entrance into a new social stratum, her official transformation from the middle-class girl who grew up sharing a bedroom with her big sister, into the successful woman who belonged in exclusive venues with influential people. Including Maya and me would have required acknowledging her more modest origins, something that apparently no longer fit the narrative she wanted to create about her life. The realization that I had been systematically excluded from the most important event in my sister's life forced me to reevaluate years of interactions that I had interpreted as innocent or understandable. Victoria's decreasing availability for family events wasn't just about being busy with work. Her shortened visits weren't just about having demanding social obligations. Her lack of interest in Maya's achievements and milestones wasn't just about being distracted by her own concerns. Victoria had been gradually distancing herself from us because we represented a version of herself that she no longer wanted to acknowledge. Maya's handmade cards and earnest artistic efforts didn't align with the sophisticated aesthetic Victoria was cultivating. My struggles as a single mother working multiple jobs to make ends meet didn't complement her image as a successful professional with an enviable lifestyle. I thought about all the times I had defended Victoria to other family members who had noticed her increasing absence and self-absorption. When my cousin Jennifer had commented on Victoria's tendency to dominate conversations with stories about her expensive purchases and exclusive experiences, I had explained that success sometimes changed people's perspectives temporarily. When my Aunt Susan had wondered aloud why Victoria never seemed interested in hearing about other people's lives anymore, I had suggested that career pressures could make anyone more self-focused than usual. I had been so invested in maintaining the fiction that Victoria was still the loving sister I remembered that I had ignored mounting evidence to the contrary. Every excuse I made for her behavior was really an excuse for my own willingness to accept treatment that fell far short of what family relationships should provide. Maya's unwavering love for Victoria, despite the obvious cooling of their relationship, had been both heartbreaking and inspiring to witness. Even when Victoria barely acknowledged her drawings or forgot promises to spend time together, Maya continued creating art specifically for her aunt and asking when they would see each other again. Maya's capacity for unconditional love had made Victoria's gradual rejection of our family even more painful to observe. I realized that part of my willingness to tolerate Victoria's behavior had come from a desire to protect Maya from understanding that family love could be conditional and temporary. I wanted my daughter to grow up believing that family members were permanent sources of support and affection, people who could be counted on regardless of circumstances or changes in life status. But my efforts to shield Maya from the reality of Victoria's priorities had probably done her a disservice. By making excuses for Victoria's behavior and encouraging Maya to keep reaching out with love and creativity, I had inadvertently taught my daughter that it was normal to accept minimal effort from people who claimed to care about her. The wedding exclusion represented the culmination of a pattern that had been building for years, but it also provided an opportunity for clarity that I hadn't allowed myself before. I could no longer pretend that Victoria's behavior was temporary or circumstantial. This was a deliberate choice to prioritize her new social image over her existing family relationships. Maya's response to learning about the wedding had been characteristically generous and creative. Rather than becoming angry or sulking about the exclusion, she had channeled her feelings into art that celebrated family bonds and gently reminded Victoria of positive memories they shared. Her poster project represented hours of careful work and thoughtful reflection about what family relationships should provide. Watching Maya pour her heart into creating something beautiful for someone who had hurt her feelings reminded me of my own patterns of responding to Victoria's neglect with increased effort and understanding. But Maya's approach had an innocence and optimism that my own efforts lacked. She genuinely believed that showing Victoria visual reminders of their love and connection could repair whatever had gone wrong between us. I envied Maya's faith in the power of love to overcome misunderstandings and hurt feelings. My own relationship with Victoria had become complicated by years of accumulated disappointments and gradually lowered expectations. I had learned to guard my heart against hoping for too much from our interactions, while Maya still approached Victoria with completely open enthusiasm. The contrast between Maya's hopeful efforts and Victoria's casual dismissal of our family bonds highlighted the unfairness of the situation in stark terms. Here was a 9-year-old child working to maintain a relationship with an adult who couldn't be bothered to include her in important family events. The generosity of spirit was entirely one-sided, flowing from someone too young to understand. That love should be reciprocal to someone old enough to know better. As Saturday afternoon wore on and Victoria's wedding ceremony was presumably taking place at Emerald Gardens Estate, I found myself alternating between sadness and anger on Maya's behalf. My daughter deserved family members who celebrated her artistic talents and looked forward to her presence at special occasions. She deserved adults who honored her efforts to maintain loving relationships and who saw her enthusiasm as a gift, rather than an inconvenience. Maya had been unusually quiet since showing me her poster that morning, and I could see her mind working through possibilities that I probably didn't want to consider. She had inherited my determination and my difficulty accepting unfairness, but she also had a directness and boldness that I had learned to suppress over the years. When Maya decided something was important, she found ways to make it happen regardless of adult obstacles or social conventions. Her sense of justice was uncomplicated by the fear of social awkwardness or family conflict that had taught me to accept inappropriate treatment in the name of keeping peace. I was beginning to suspect that Maya's poster project wasn't just a therapeutic exercise in processing her feelings about Victoria's behavior. Knowing my daughter's personality and her unwavering belief in the power of honest communication, I had a growing concern that she was developing a plan to deliver her message personally, regardless of whether such a delivery was invited or convenient. The afternoon sun was streaming through our apartment windows, creating the kind of perfect lighting that would be making Victoria's outdoor wedding ceremony absolutely stunning for photographs. I tried to imagine the scene at Emerald Gardens Estate, with white roses and eucalyptus creating an elegant backdrop for Victoria and Christopher's vows. Maya had been drawing quietly at the kitchen table for the past hour, working on what appeared to be a new project separate from her family poster. When I asked what she was creating, she simply said it was a map to help with something important. The determined set of her jaw and the careful attention she was paying to details that looked suspiciously like street directions made me increasingly nervous about what exactly she considered important enough to require a map. My phone buzzed with a text message from my cousin Jennifer, who was presumably at the wedding. The message contained a single photo of the ceremony in progress, showing Victoria in an elaborate white gown standing under a floral arch with Christopher beside her in his perfectly tailored suit. The image was beautiful and romantic, exactly the kind of fairy tale wedding that would generate hundreds of social media posts and lifelong memories. Looking at the photo, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Despite everything that had happened, Victoria was still my sister, and part of me felt genuine happiness seeing her marry someone she loved in such a beautiful setting. But the joy was overshadowed by the sharp reminder that Maya and I were experiencing this moment secondhand through a casual text from a cousin, rather than as welcomed family members sharing in the celebration. Maya looked up from her drawing when she noticed me staring at my phone. "Is that Aunt Vicky's wedding?" she asked, moving to look at the image over my shoulder. "Yes, sweetheart. Jennifer sent a picture from the ceremony." Maya studied the photo with the same careful attention she brought to her artwork, taking in every detail of Victoria's dress, the floral arrangements, and the elegant outdoor setting. "It looks beautiful," she said finally. "Aunt Vicky looks really happy." The generous spirit of her response reminded me again of Maya's capacity for loving people even when they disappointed her. There was no bitterness or resentment in her voice, just genuine pleasure in seeing Victoria's happiness despite our exclusion from sharing it. "She does look happy," I agreed, though my voice probably carried more sadness than Maya's had. Maya returned to her drawing with renewed focus, adding what looked like final details to her map project. When she finished, she carefully rolled up both her family poster and her new drawing, securing them with a rubber band. "Mommy?" she said with the serious tone she used when she had made an important decision. "I think it's time to deliver these to Aunt Vicky." The simple statement filled me with a mixture of pride and panic. Pride because my daughter's instincts about the importance of fighting for family relationships were absolutely correct. Panic because I could see that Maya was prepared to take action that would likely create exactly the kind of family drama that Victoria's wedding was designed to avoid. "Maya, honey, you know we can't just show up at Aunt Vicky's wedding when we weren't invited." "We're not showing up at the wedding, Mommy. We're showing up for family. Sometimes those are different things." The wisdom in her statement was undeniable, even if the practical implications were terrifying. Maya had identified the core issue with startling clarity. Victoria's wedding was an event, but family was a relationship that transcended specific occasions or formal invitations. As I looked at my determined daughter holding her rolled-up messages of love and family solidarity, I realized that we had reached a crossroads that would define not just our relationship with Victoria, but Maya's understanding of her own worth and the value of standing up for what she believed was right. The afternoon was fading toward evening, and somewhere across town, Victoria's wedding reception was probably just beginning. Maya's map suggested she had researched the location of Emerald Gardens estate, and the resolute expression on her face indicated that she was prepared to use that information regardless of my approval or participation. I found myself facing a choice between protecting Maya from potential embarrassment and hurt, or supporting her instinct to fight for family relationships that were worth preserving. Neither option felt entirely right, but Maya's courage and moral clarity were beginning to convince me that sometimes the most important battles are the ones that feel most uncomfortable to wage. 20 minutes later, I found myself driving toward Emerald Gardens estate with Maya beside me, her poster and map carefully secured in the back seat. The decision to support her mission had happened gradually, then all at once. Maya's unwavering Determination to deliver her message of family love had worn down my adult anxieties about social appropriateness and potential embarrassment. "Are you sure about this, sweetheart?" I asked as we turned onto the winding road that led to the wedding venue. My hands were gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary, and my stomach was churning with nerves about what we were about to do. Maya's response was calm and confident. "I'm sure, Mommy. Sometimes when people forget important things, they need someone to help them remember. That's what families do for each other." The simplicity of her logic was both comforting and terrifying. Maya approached this situation with the moral clarity that only children possess, uncomplicated by adult fears about social awkwardness or family politics. In her 9-year-old understanding, love required action, and action sometimes required courage that adults had learned to suppress. As we approached Emerald Gardens estate, the scope and elegance of Victoria's wedding became immediately apparent. The venue was stunning, with manicured gardens stretching across rolling hills and an impressive stone mansion serving as the backdrop for the celebration. Luxury cars filled the circular driveway, and I could see guests in formal attire moving. Between the outdoor ceremony area and what appeared to be an elegant reception space under a massive white tent, the sight of such obvious expense and exclusivity made our uninvited presence feel even more presumptuous. This wasn't just a family gathering that we had accidentally been excluded from. This was a carefully curated event where every detail had been planned to create a specific atmosphere of sophistication and refinement. Maya pressed her face to the car window, taking in the beautiful setting with wide-eyed appreciation rather than intimidation. "It really is pretty, Mommy. Aunt Vicky must be so happy." Her genuine pleasure in Victoria's happiness, despite our exclusion from sharing it, reminded me again of Maya's extraordinary capacity for unconditional love. She wasn't here to disrupt Victoria's celebration or create drama. She was here to offer a gift of family connection that she believed Victoria needed to receive. I parked at the edge of the property, uncertain about the protocol for uninvited arrivals at expensive wedding venues. My graphic design work had occasionally taken me to upscale events, but always as a welcomed professional with a clear purpose for being there. This situation was entirely different, and I felt completely out of my depth. Maya climbed out of the car with her poster tube, straightening her blue dress and checking to make sure her art supplies were properly organized in her small backpack. She looked like a tiny ambassador preparing for an important diplomatic mission, serious and purposeful, but not anxious. "What's the plan, Maya?" I asked, hoping she had thought through the logistics better than I had. "We find Aunt Vicky, I give her the poster, and I explain why families should stay together. Then she'll understand that she made a mistake, and everything will be better." The optimism in her voice was heartbreaking and inspiring in equal measure. Maya truly believed that her message could bridge the gap that had developed in our family relationships, that love and honesty could overcome whatever had caused Victoria to exclude us from this important day. As we walked toward the main reception area, I could see guests mingling on the terrace, champagne glasses in hand, laughing and chatting in small groups. The women were dressed in elegant cocktail dresses and the men in expensive suits, creating exactly the kind of sophisticated atmosphere that Victoria had apparently wanted to preserve by limiting her guest list. Maya and I definitely stood out in this crowd. My simple black dress, bought on sale at Target 3 years ago, and Maya's sweet but obviously inexpensive blue dress marked us as people who didn't quite belong in this rarefied social environment. But Maya seemed oblivious to the visual contrast, focused entirely on her mission to deliver her message of family love. We were about halfway across the lawn when I spotted Victoria. She was radiant in her elaborate wedding gown, posed near the floral arch where she had presumably exchanged vows with Christopher just hours earlier. A professional photographer was capturing her interaction with a group of elegantly dressed women who were laughing at something she had said. Seeing Victoria in her wedding dress, glowing with happiness and surrounded by people who had been deemed worthy of inclusion in her special day, brought home the full reality of our exclusion in a way that social media posts hadn't quite managed. This was my sister on the most important day of her life, and Maya and I were strangers looking in from the outside. Maya spotted Victoria at the same moment I did. Her face lit up with joy and excitement, and she started walking faster toward her aunt, clutching her poster tube with both hands. I followed behind her, my heart pounding with anticipation and dread about what was going to happen next. We were still about 20 feet away when Victoria noticed us. The expression that crossed her face was complex, cycling rapidly through surprise, confusion, and what looked like panic. She said something to the photographer, who stopped taking pictures and stepped back with a puzzled expression. "Maya! Becca!" Victoria called out, her voice pitched higher than usual. "What are you doing here?" Maya's response was immediate and enthusiastic. "Aunt Vicky, congratulations on your wedding. You look so beautiful." She ran the remaining distance between them, her poster tube bouncing against her side. Victoria's smile looked strained as she bent down to receive Maya's hug. Over Maya's head, she made eye contact with me, her expression clearly communicating both confusion and alarm about our unexpected appearance at her carefully planned celebration. "Maya, sweetheart, this is such a surprise," Victoria said, her voice carrying the forced cheerfulness adults use when they're trying to manage an uncomfortable situation in front of other people. "How did you know where to find me?" "I made a map," Maya announced proudly, pulling back from the hug to look up at Victoria's face. "And I brought you something really important. I worked on it all week because I wanted you to remember something special on your wedding day." The photographer had moved away, but several guests were starting to notice the interaction between Victoria and the uninvited child who had appeared in the middle of the reception. I could see people turning to look, their expressions curious and slightly confused about who we were and why we were there. Maya began unwrapping her poster, her movements careful and deliberate as she revealed the artwork she had created to remind Victoria about the importance of family relationships. When she held it up for Victoria to see, the detailed drawings and heartfelt messages were clearly visible to anyone standing nearby. "See, Aunt Vicky? I drew all the times our family was together and happy. And I wrote about why families should stay together even when things get complicated. I thought you might have forgotten because you didn't invite us to your wedding, but that's okay because sometimes people forget important things when they're busy." The innocent directness of Maya's explanation created a moment of absolute silence among the guests who were close enough to hear her words. Victoria's face went through several different expressions as she processed what Maya was saying and showing her. "Maya, honey, this is beautiful, but this isn't really the right time," Victoria began, her voice carrying the strained politeness of someone trying to manage a social crisis without creating a scene. But Maya wasn't finished. With the persistence that came from months of feeling confused about Victoria's distance, she continued her explanation with the kind of clarity that only children possess when they're addressing injustice. "I know you're busy getting married, but I thought this was the most important time to remember about family. Because when people get married, they're supposed to be celebrating with the people who love them most. And we love you most, Aunt Vicky, even when you don't invite us to important things." The words hung in the air like a challenge that couldn't be ignored or deflected. Maya had stated the fundamental issue with such simple honesty that it was impossible to pretend the situation was about anything other than what it actually was: a family celebration that had deliberately excluded family members. I could see Victoria struggling to find a response that would address Maya's concerns without acknowledging the validity of her criticism in front of the wedding guests, who were now openly listening to the conversation. Several people had moved closer, apparently fascinated by the drama that was unfolding in the middle of what had been a perfectly orchestrated celebration. "Maya, sweetie, weddings are very complicated to plan, and sometimes—" Victoria tried again, but Maya interrupted her with the kind of gentle firmness that showed she had been thinking about this conversation for a long time. "Aunt Vicky, I know about complicated things. Like when mommy has to work 2 jobs and still help me with my homework, or when we have to save money for months to buy something special. But we always make room for family, even when things are complicated. That's what love means. The simple wisdom of Maya's words was devastating in its accuracy. She had cut through all the adult rationalizations and social considerations to identify the core truth. Love makes room, even when circumstances are challenging. Victoria's eyes filled with tears as she looked down at Maya's earnest face and then up at the poster that documented years of family memories and moments of connection. I could see her processing not just Maya's words, but the evidence of love and effort that my daughter had put into creating this reminder of what they had shared. Christopher appeared at Victoria's side, having noticed the unusual interaction, and come to investigate. His expression showed polite confusion as he took in the scene, his new wife on the verge of tears, a child holding a handmade poster about family relationships, and a small crowd of wedding guests watching with obvious fascination. "Victoria, is everything okay?" he asked quietly, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. Maya turned to Christopher with the same open enthusiasm she had shown Victoria. "Hi, Uncle Christopher. I'm Maya, Victoria's niece. Congratulations on marrying my aunt. I made this poster to remind everyone about why families are important, especially on special days like weddings." Christopher looked from Maya to the poster to Victoria's tear-filled eyes, clearly trying to understand the situation without having enough context to make sense of what was happening. His confusion was evident as he processed the implications of Maya's presence and her message about family inclusion. "Maya, this is very thoughtful," Christopher said carefully. "But perhaps this conversation would be better suited for a different time." "No," Maya said firmly, with the kind of polite determination that showed she had inherited both my stubborn streak and a moral courage that I sometimes lacked. "This is exactly the right time. This is when Aunt Vicky is promising to love someone forever. So this is when she should remember that she already has people who love her forever." The logic was unassailable, and Maya's delivery was so sincere and heartfelt that it was impossible to dismiss her words as childish interruption. She was making a fundamental point about the nature of love and commitment that went to the heart of what wedding celebrations were supposed to represent. Victoria knelt down to Maya's eye level, and for the first time since we had arrived, her expression showed genuine emotion rather than social management. "Maya, you're absolutely right. I did forget something important, and I'm sorry. I got so focused on making everything perfect that I forgot what perfect really means." The admission was quiet but clear enough for the gathered guests to hear. Victoria reached out to touch Maya's face gently, her voice thick with emotion as she continued. "Perfect means having the people you love with you, not just the people who fit the right image or make things look a certain way." Maya's face brightened with the kind of joy that comes from feeling truly heard and understood. "So, you remember now? You remember that we're family and families stay together?" "Yes, sweetheart, I remember. And I'm sorry it took you coming here to remind me." Victoria stood up and looked at me directly for the first time since we had arrived. The expression on her face showed a complex mixture of shame, gratitude, and genuine remorse that told me she was finally seeing the situation clearly. "Becca, I owe you an apology too. A bigger apology than I know how to give. Maya is right about everything, and I've been wrong about what matters most." The acknowledgement felt like a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying suddenly lifting from my shoulders. For years, I had been wondering if I was being too sensitive about Victoria's treatment, if my hurt feelings were justified, or if I was expecting too much from family relationships. Maya's intervention had forced Victoria to confront the reality of her choices and their impact on people who loved her. Christopher was watching this exchange with growing understanding, and his expression suggested that he was processing not just the immediate situation, but the broader implications of what Maya's presence revealed about his new wife's family. Relationships. "Victoria," he said quietly, "maybe we should invite Becca and Maya to join the reception. If they're family, they should be here with us." The offer was generous and showed a kind of instinctive understanding about what the moment required, but Maya shook her head with the kind of gracious wisdom that continued to amaze me. "Thank you, Uncle Christopher, but we didn't come to crash your wedding. We came to make sure Aunt Vicky remembered something important. And now she remembers, so our job is done." Victoria's tears were flowing freely now as she processed the generosity of Maya's mission and the grace with which my daughter was handling a situation that could have been vindictive or demanding. Maya had asked for nothing except acknowledgement of the family bond that Victoria had temporarily forgotten. "Maya, I don't deserve how kind you're being to me right now," Victoria said, her voice breaking. "You and your mom should have been here from the beginning. You should have been part of planning this day and celebrating with us." "It's okay, Aunt Vicky. Sometimes people make mistakes, but that doesn't mean we stop loving them. Love means helping people remember what's important." The wisdom in Maya's words was profound, and I could see that her message was resonating not just with Victoria, but with the wedding guests who had witnessed this unexpected lesson in family loyalty and unconditional love. Victoria pulled Maya into another hug, this one longer and more genuine than the first. "I love you so much, Maya, and I promise I'm going to be a better aunt from now on. A better sister, too." When they separated, Victoria turned to me with an expression that showed she understood the magnitude of what had just happened. "Becca, can you forgive me? For all of it?" The question was simple, but the answer was complicated by years of accumulated hurt and disappointment. However, standing there watching Maya's face glow with happiness at having successfully delivered her message of family love, I realized that forgiveness wasn't just about what Victoria deserved. It was about what kind of example I wanted to set for my daughter about the power of love to heal broken relationships. "Yes, Victoria, I can forgive you. We're family, and Maya's right about what that means." The reconciliation that followed wasn't perfect or complete, but it was genuine. Victoria and Christopher did invite us to stay for the reception, and while the evening was sometimes awkward as we navigated relationships that had been damaged but not destroyed, it was also healing in ways I hadn't expected. Maya spent the evening creating small drawings for various wedding guests, her natural friendliness and artistic talents making her popular with people who had initially seemed intimidating. Watching her interact with Victoria's social circle, I realized that my daughter's worth had never been in question. Only Victoria's ability to recognize and appreciate it had been compromised. Victoria made a point of introducing us to everyone as her sister and niece, her pride in our presence feeling authentic rather than performative. She asked Maya about her art classes, her school projects, and her latest drawings with the kind of genuine interest that had been missing from their interactions for years. The evening wasn't a complete erasure of the hurt that had been caused, but it was a beginning. Maya's courage in confronting injustice and her wisdom in responding to conflict with love rather than anger had created an opportunity for healing that wouldn't have existed otherwise. As we drove home that night, Maya was quiet for most of the trip, processing the events of the day with the same thoughtfulness she brought to her artwork. Finally, she spoke up from the back seat. "Mommy, I'm glad Aunt Vicky remembered about family. But I'm also glad we had to remind her, because now I know that we're strong enough to stand up for what's important." Her observation captured something essential about what had happened. Maya's intervention hadn't just repaired our relationship with Victoria, it had demonstrated to both of us that we had the courage and moral clarity to fight for relationships that were worth preserving. The experience taught Maya that love sometimes requires difficult conversations and brave actions. It taught me that my daughter's instincts about justice and family loyalty were more reliable than my own adult fears about social awkwardness and conflict avoidance. Most importantly, it reminded our entire family that authentic relationships require honesty, effort, and the willingness to prioritize genuine connection over superficial harmony. Maya's poster about why families should stay together had delivered a message that went far beyond the specific circumstances of Victoria's wedding. In the months that followed, Victoria made genuine efforts to rebuild her relationships with Maya and me. She started visiting regularly again, and her interest in Maya's artwork and achievements felt authentic rather than obligatory. She never missed another important family event, and when she and Christopher bought a larger house the following year, Maya's drawings were among the first decorations they hung in their new home. The wedding that had initially represented our exclusion from Victoria's life ultimately became the catalyst for healing relationships that had been damaged by years of neglect and misplaced priorities. Maya's courage in confronting injustice with love had created space for authentic family connections to flourish. Looking back on that day, I remain amazed by my daughter's wisdom and bravery. At 9 years old, she understood something about love and family that the adults in her life had temporarily forgotten. That authentic relationships require presence, effort, and the willingness to fight for connection, even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient. Maya's lesson about family loyalty and unconditional love continues to influence how I approach relationships and challenges in my own life. Her example reminds me that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with anger or demands, but with art, honesty, and an unwavering belief in the power of love to overcome misunderstanding and heal broken bonds. 6 months after Victoria's wedding, our family dynamic had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. The changes weren't dramatic or sudden, but they were profound and lasting, built on the foundation that Maya's courage had established that day at Emerald Gardens Estate. Victoria had kept her promise to be a better aunt and sister. She started calling every Sunday evening, not with the rushed, distracted conversations of the past, but with genuine interest in our weekly routines and Maya's latest projects. These calls became something Maya looked forward to, often preparing stories and sketches to share with her aunt during their conversations. The first Sunday call had been awkward, with Victoria clearly trying to figure out how to rebuild a relationship that she had damaged through years of neglect. She asked tentative questions about Maya's school and my work, her voice carrying the uncertainty of someone who realized she had lost touch with the basic details of our lives. Maya, with her characteristic generosity, had immediately filled the conversation with enthusiastic updates about her art class projects, her favorite books, and her latest drawings. She seemed to harbor no resentment about the past, instead embracing Victoria's renewed attention with the same open-hearted enthusiasm she had always shown. As the weeks passed, these Sunday conversations became more natural and meaningful. Victoria began remembering details from previous calls, asking follow-up questions about Maya's art teacher, Mrs. Chen, or my latest graphic design clients. She started sending photos of things that reminded her of our conversations, like interesting architecture she thought Maya might want to sketch, or design work that she thought might inspire my own projects. The transformation in Victoria's behavior extended beyond our phone calls. She began making time for regular visits, often driving the hour from Newport Beach to Riverside on Saturday afternoons to spend real time with us, rather than the brief, photo-focused visits of the past. During one of these visits, about 2 months after the wedding, Victoria had asked Maya if she could see more of her artwork. Maya had eagerly pulled out her portfolio, a large folder where she kept her favorite drawings and paintings from the past year. As Victoria looked through Maya's work, her expression showed genuine amazement at the skill and creativity her niece had developed. She spent long minutes studying each piece, asking Maya about her inspiration and techniques with the kind of focused attention that meant everything to a young artist. "Maya, these are incredible," Victoria had said, holding up a particularly detailed drawing of our apartment building with all the neighbors visible in their windows. "You've captured so much personality and life in each person. This is real talent, not just kids' artwork." The distinction was important because it showed that Victoria was seeing Maya as an individual with unique gifts rather than just a generic child to be politely acknowledged. Maya's face had glowed with pride at having her artistic vision recognized and appreciated by an adult whose opinion mattered to her. Victoria had asked if she could have copies of some of Maya's drawings to frame for her office, explaining that she wanted clients to see the work of her talented niece. Maya had spent the rest of that visit carefully selecting pieces she thought would look good in a professional setting, taking Victoria's request seriously and feeling honored to have her work displayed in such an important place, the office. Display became a source of ongoing pride for Maya and a conversation starter that Victoria genuinely enjoyed. She would call to tell us about clients who had noticed Maya's artwork and commented on the talent evident in the drawings. These stories made Maya feel connected to Victoria's professional world in a positive way, rather than feeling like an embarrassment that needed to be hidden from sophisticated contacts. Christopher had also made efforts to build a genuine relationship with us, rather than treating us as family obligations that came with marrying Victoria. He started joining Victoria for some of her visits to Riverside, and his interactions with Maya became more natural and engaging as he discovered her interests and personality. During one memorable visit, Christopher had brought his camera and asked Maya if she would be willing to pose for some portraits that he could give to Victoria as a gift. Maya had been thrilled by the attention and the professional treatment, and the resulting photographs were beautiful, capturing not just Maya's appearance but her artistic spirit and joyful personality. Victoria had those portraits professionally framed and placed them prominently in their home, replacing some of the generic art pieces that had previously decorated their living room. When Maya saw her own face looking back from Victoria's mantle, during our next visit, her expression showed a deep sense of belonging that had been missing from our family relationships for too long. The changes in our family dynamic weren't limited to Victoria's improved behavior. Maya's successful intervention at the wedding had given her a new understanding of her own agency and the power of standing up for what she believed was right. This newfound confidence showed up in various aspects of Maya's life. At school, she became more willing to share her artwork with classmates and teachers, no longer hiding her talents out of modesty or fear of standing out. Her art teacher, Mrs. Chen, noticed the change and recommended Maya for an advanced young artist program at the local community center. Maya's success in advocating for family relationships also made her more confident about addressing other situations where she felt something was unfair or wrong. When she noticed that a new student in her class was being excluded from playground activities, Maya organized an art project that brought the whole class together, using her creative skills to build inclusion rather than just talking about it. The ripple effects of Maya's courage extended to my own life as well. Watching my 9-year-old daughter successfully confront injustice with love and determination had inspired me to be more assertive in my own relationships and professional situations. At Café Luna, where I worked part-time, I had always been the employee who accepted difficult shifts and unreasonable requests without complaint, afraid that speaking up might jeopardize my job security. But Maya's example of standing up for what was right, even when it was uncomfortable, encouraged me to advocate for fair treatment in my own workplace. When my manager consistently scheduled me for the most challenging shifts while giving preferred hours to employees with less experience, I found the courage to request a meeting and discuss the situation professionally. The conversation led to a more equitable schedule and increased respect from my colleagues, who appreciated my willingness to address problems directly rather than accepting unfair treatment silently. Maya's intervention at Victoria's wedding had also strengthened my freelance graphic design business in unexpected ways. Watching my daughter's artistic talents receive recognition and respect from Victoria's professional circle reminded me that my own creative skills had value beyond just supplementing our household income. I began approaching potential clients with more confidence, pricing my services appropriately, rather than undervaluing my work out of desperation for any paying project. The increased confidence led to better clients and more interesting projects, gradually building a portfolio that I was genuinely proud of rather than just grateful for. The transformation in our family relationships had the most significant impact on our holiday celebrations and special occasions. The Christmas following Victoria's wedding was dramatically different from previous years, with Victoria actively participating in planning and preparation, rather than showing up briefly for photos before leaving for more exciting obligations. Victoria arrived early on Christmas Eve with thoughtfully chosen gifts that showed she had been paying attention to our conversations throughout the year. For Maya, she brought a professional quality set of drawing pencils and a leather portfolio case, acknowledging her niece's artistic ambitions with tools that supported her growth rather than generic toys that would be quickly forgotten. For me, Victoria gave a beautifully bound sketchbook and a note explaining that she had commissioned Maya to create a custom design for the cover, making the gift a collaboration between aunt and niece that honored both my creative work and Maya's artistic vision. The thoughtfulness behind the gift showed a level of attention and care that had been missing from our relationships for years. Maya's gift to Victoria that Christmas was a hand-drawn portrait of Victoria and Christopher on their wedding day, created from memory and the photographs that had been shared on social media. The artwork captured not just their physical appearance, but the joy and love that had been evident during their celebration, showing Maya's ability to see beyond the hurt of exclusion to appreciate the genuine happiness of the moment. Victoria had cried when she opened Maya's gift, understanding that her niece had chosen to commemorate the very day that had initially excluded them, but ultimately brought the family back together. The portrait now hangs in Victoria and Christopher's bedroom, a daily reminder of the healing that had grown from Maya's courage and wisdom. Our parents, Patricia and Robert, had also been affected by the changes in our family dynamic. Initially, they had been uncomfortable with the confrontation at Victoria's wedding, worried about family harmony and social appearances. But as they witnessed the positive changes that followed Maya's intervention, they began to understand that authentic relationships required honesty and effort rather than just polite pretense. Patricia started making more effort to include Maya and me in family planning and decision-making, rather than assuming that we would simply accommodate whatever arrangements worked best for Victoria. When planning the family's Easter celebration, she called to ask about our preferences and schedule before finalizing the details, showing a new awareness of our equal status within the family structure. Robert, who had always been somewhat distant and uncomfortable with emotional conversations, began showing more interest in Maya's artistic development. He started bringing her art supplies and books about famous artists, engaging with her creative interests in ways that showed genuine support rather than obligatory grandfather duties. The relationship between Maya and her grandparents deepened as they began to see her as an individual with unique talents and perspectives rather than just Victoria's niece who happened to be present at family gatherings. Maya's confidence in expressing her thoughts and feelings had grown since the wedding intervention, making her interactions with all family members more engaging and meaningful. One particularly significant change was in how our family handled disagreements and conflicts. Maya's example of addressing problems directly but lovingly had shown everyone a better way to navigate difficult conversations. When a scheduling conflict arose around Maya's birthday celebration, instead of making assumptions or allowing hurt feelings to fester, Victoria called immediately to discuss options and find a solution that would work for everyone. The conversation was honest about competing priorities, but focused on finding ways to honor what was important to each family member. This approach to conflict resolution became a new family pattern, with people addressing issues when they arose rather than allowing resentment to build over time. The result was relationships that felt more authentic and resilient, built on trust that problems could be discussed and resolved, rather than avoided or endured. Maya's art continued to evolve and improve, influenced by the increased support and recognition she was receiving from family members. Her confidence as an artist grew as she realized that her creative vision had value and meaning beyond just personal expression. She began experimenting with different mediums and techniques, exploring watercolors, pastels, and digital art tools that Victoria had researched and provided. Maya's artistic development became a family project, with everyone contributing support and encouragement in their own ways. Victoria arranged for Maya to visit art galleries and museums during their time together, exposing her to diverse artistic styles and techniques while also treating her interests with the kind of serious attention usually reserved for adult pursuits. These cultural experiences broadened Maya's artistic perspective and reinforced her sense that creativity was a valuable and respected endeavor. Christopher contributed his photography skills, teaching Maya about composition, lighting, and visual storytelling in ways that enhanced her drawing and painting abilities. He approached these lessons with the same professional respect he would show an adult colleague, recognizing Maya's genuine talent and treating her artistic education as an important investment. The portfolio of Maya's work continued to grow, documenting not just her improving technical skills, but also her evolving understanding of relationships, family, and the power of art to communicate emotions and ideas. Many of her recent pieces reflected themes of connection, healing, and the importance of standing up for what you believe is right. One drawing that particularly moved me showed our family gathered around a dinner table, but instead of the idealized perfection that might have appeared in her earlier work, this piece captured the authentic complexity of real relationships. The faces showed genuine emotions, including traces of past hurt alongside current joy, creating a portrait of family love that was honest rather than sanitized. As I watched Maya create this piece, carefully considering how to represent each person's unique personality and role within our family structure, I marveled at her emotional intelligence and artistic maturity. The 9-year-old who had courageously confronted injustice at Victoria's wedding had continued growing into someone who understood that love could coexist with disappointment, that forgiveness didn't require forgetting, and that authentic relationships were more valuable than perfect appearances. The anniversary of Victoria's wedding approached with none of the anxiety or sadness that I might have expected. Instead of marking a day of exclusion and hurt, the date had become a celebration of family healing and the power of courage to transform relationships. Victoria called that morning to thank us again for Maya's intervention and to acknowledge how much our family had gained from that difficult but necessary confrontation. She spoke about the ways her perspective on family and priorities had changed, crediting Maya's wisdom with helping her remember what truly mattered in life. Maya listened to Victoria's call with the same grace she had shown throughout the entire process of family healing. She didn't minimize the hurt that had been caused, but she also didn't dwell on past grievances. Instead, she focused on the positive, changes that had grown from that challenging day, showing a maturity that continued to amaze everyone who knew her. That evening, as I watched Maya work on her latest art project, a series of drawings about families who supported each other through difficult times, I reflected on everything that had changed since that difficult discovery about Victoria's wedding plans. Maya's courage in confronting injustice had not only healed our family relationships, but had also taught all of us valuable lessons about love, advocacy, and the importance of standing up for what we believe is right. Her example had inspired each family member to become more authentic, more generous, and more willing to address problems directly rather than allowing them to fester. The little girl who had created a poster about why families should stay together had become the catalyst for our family actually learning how to stay together in meaningful, supportive ways. Her artistic talents had always been impressive, but her emotional wisdom and moral courage had proven to be her greatest gifts. As I tucked Maya into bed that night, she looked up at me with the same serious expression she had worn when planning her intervention at Victoria's wedding. "Mommy, I'm glad Aunt Vicky's wedding happened the way it did. Even though it was sad at first, it helped everyone remember what families are supposed to do for each other." Her observation captured the profound truth that sometimes the most painful experiences become the foundation for the most meaningful growth. Maya's willingness to confront injustice with love rather than anger had created space for healing that, wouldn't have been possible through avoidance or polite pretense. Looking back on that transformative year, I remained amazed by my daughter's wisdom and grateful for the family relationships that had been rebuilt on a foundation of honesty, effort, and mutual respect. Maya's lesson about the power of love to overcome misunderstanding and heal broken bonds had changed not just our family dynamic, but each individual family member's understanding of what authentic relationships required. The story of Maya's intervention at Victoria's wedding had become family legend, told and retold as an example of how courage and creativity could transform even the most difficult situations. But more than just a memorable story, it had become a template for how our family approached challenges and conflicts, with Maya's example inspiring everyone to choose love and honesty over convenience and comfort. As I turned off Maya's bedroom light and headed to my own room, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought our family to this place of authentic connection and mutual support. The pain of exclusion had been real and significant, but the healing that had grown from Maya's courageous response had created relationships that were stronger and more meaningful than anything we had shared before. Maya's artistic talents continued to flourish, but her greatest masterpiece would always be the love and wisdom she had used to bring our family back together. Her poster about why families should stay together had accomplished exactly what she had intended, creating a foundation for relationships built on presence, effort, and the unwavering belief that love was worth fighting for. 2 years had passed. Since that transformative day at Emerald Gardens Estate, and Maya was now 11 years old, her artistic abilities having flourished beyond anything I could have imagined when she was creating simple drawings at our kitchen table. The confidence she had gained from successfully advocating for our family had translated into every aspect of her life, making her not just a talented artist, but a natural leader among her peers and a source of wisdom that continued to surprise the adults around her. The Advanced Young Artists program at the Riverside Community Center had become the highlight of Maya's week. Under the guidance of Professor Elena Martinez, a retired art teacher from UC Riverside, Maya had been introduced to art history, different cultural artistic traditions, and advanced techniques that challenged her creative abilities in new ways. Professor Martinez had quickly recognized Maya's exceptional talent and emotional depth, often using her work as examples for the other students in the program. During one particularly memorable session, Professor Martinez had asked each student to create a piece that represented their understanding of social justice. While other children drew pictures of recycling or helping elderly neighbors, Maya had created a complex mixed media piece that showed different families gathering around various celebration tables, with some tables full of people and others showing empty chairs with ghostly outlines of missing family members. The piece was titled, "Every Chair Matters," and included a written artist's statement explaining that true celebration required including everyone who belonged, not just the people who were easiest to accommodate. Professor Martinez had been so moved by Maya's work that she had arranged for it to be displayed in the community center's main gallery, where it remained as a centerpiece that drew comments and discussion from visitors throughout the year. Maya's artistic recognition had begun extending beyond our local community. A regional youth art competition had selected her piece, Bridges of Understanding, as the winner in her age category, earning her a scholarship to attend a summer art intensive at the California Institute of the Arts. The scholarship represented not just recognition of her technical skills, but acknowledgement of the emotional intelligence and social awareness that characterized her work. Victoria had been instrumental in helping Maya prepare for the summer program, researching the curriculum and faculty, helping her organize her portfolio, and even offering to drive her to campus for the orientation session. The level of support and involvement Victoria now showed in Maya's artistic development represented a complete transformation from the aunt who had once barely glanced at her niece's drawings. The summer art intensive had been a revelation for Maya, exposing her to young artists from across California and introducing her to mentors who recognized her unique perspective and encouraged her to explore themes of family, belonging, and social justice through her artwork. She had returned home with new techniques, expanded artistic vocabulary, and friendships with other young people who shared her passion for using art to communicate important messages. One of the most significant relationships Maya had developed was with her roommate at the summer program, a 12-year-old girl named Isabella from San Francisco whose family had immigrated from Guatemala. Isabella had created powerful artwork about the experience of maintaining cultural identity while adapting to a new country, and her friendship with Maya had expanded both girls' understanding of how art could address complex social and emotional themes. The friendship had continued after the summer program ended, with Maya and Isabella maintaining regular contact through video calls and shared art projects. They had collaborated on a series of drawings about different types of families and what home meant to people from various backgrounds. The collaboration had been so successful that Professor Martinez had arranged for their joint work to be featured in a traveling exhibition about youth perspectives on community and belonging. Maya's growing reputation as a young artist with important things to say had led to invitations to speak at school assemblies and community events about the power of art to create positive change. Initially nervous about public speaking, Maya had discovered that her passion for her message overcame her anxiety about being in front of groups. During one particularly impactful presentation at Roosevelt Elementary School, Maya had shared the story of her family poster and how art could help people remember what was truly important in their relationships. She had encouraged her young audience to use their own creative abilities to address problems they saw in their families, schools, and communities, emphasizing that age didn't disqualify someone from making meaningful contributions to solving important issues. The response from students and teachers had been overwhelmingly positive, with several children approaching Maya after her presentation to share their own ideas for art projects that could help with problems they had identified. Maya had spent time with each child, offering encouragement and practical suggestions with the same generous spirit she had always shown when sharing her artistic knowledge. My own professional life had continued to benefit from the confidence I had gained. Watching Maya successfully advocate for our family, the freelance graphic design business that had once been just a side income had grown into my primary source of revenue, allowing me to reduce my hours at Café Luna and focus more on creative work that truly engaged my skills and interests. One of my most meaningful projects had been designing promotional materials for Professor Martinez's community art program, creating brochures and signage that captured the program's mission of using art education to build confidence and social awareness in young people. The project had been personally satisfying because it directly supported the environment where Maya had flourished, creating a positive cycle of community investment and growth. The design work had led to other projects with local nonprofits and educational organizations, establishing a niche specialty in creating materials for groups that served children and families. The work was not only financially rewarding, but emotionally fulfilling, allowing me to use my professional skills to support causes that aligned with my values about community support and family strengthening. Victoria had become one of my most enthusiastic advocates, frequently recommending my design services to her real estate colleagues and clients who needed marketing materials or branding work. Her professional endorsements had opened doors to higher-paying projects and more prestigious clients, demonstrating how family support could create positive professional opportunities when relationships were built on genuine care and mutual respect. The dynamic between Victoria and me had evolved into something resembling true friendship rather than just family obligation. We had developed our own traditions separate from larger family gatherings, including monthly lunch dates where we could talk honestly about our lives, challenges, and goals, without the pressure of managing other family relationships or social expectations. During these conversations, Victoria had shared her own journey of understanding how success and social status had temporarily blinded her to what actually mattered in life. She spoke openly about the pressure she had felt to maintain a certain image and how Christopher's family and social circle had initially reinforced those values before they both recognized the emptiness of relationships built primarily on appearances and material success. Christopher had proven to be more than just a supportive spouse in Victoria's journey toward authentic family relationships. He had become a genuine friend and advocate for Maya and me, often initiating family activities and demonstrating through his actions that he valued our presence in their lives rather than merely tolerating it as an obligation that came with marrying Victoria. His photography hobby had evolved into semi-professional work, and he had begun documenting family events and milestones with the kind of attention and care usually reserved for paying clients. The resulting albums and portraits had become treasured family keepsakes that captured not just how we looked, but how we felt during important moments together. Christopher's legal background had also proven valuable when Maya's art began generating opportunities that required contract review and intellectual property considerations. He had volunteered his professional services to ensure that Maya's interests were protected as her work gained recognition and commercial potential, treating her artistic career with the same seriousness he would show an adult client. The relationship between Maya and her grandparents had deepened significantly as Patricia and Robert learned to see their granddaughter as an individual with unique talents and perspectives, rather than just a child to be politely acknowledged during family gatherings. Maya's confidence in expressing her thoughts and ideas had made their interactions more engaging and meaningful for everyone involved. Patricia had begun attending some of Maya's art exhibitions and presentations, proudly introducing herself as Maya's grandmother and showing genuine interest in understanding the messages and techniques behind her granddaughter's work. The transformation from someone who had once worried about Maya being a distraction to someone who actively promoted her achievements represented a fundamental shift in how our family valued different types of contributions and talents. Robert had surprised everyone by developing a deep appreciation for Maya's artistic abilities and what they represented about creativity and self-expression. He had begun researching art supplies and educational opportunities, often arriving at family gatherings with carefully selected materials that supported Maya's current interests and projects. The ripple effects of Maya's courage at Victoria's wedding had extended beyond our immediate family to influence how we all approached relationships and conflicts in other areas of our lives. The example of addressing problems directly but lovingly had become a template that we applied to friendships, work relationships, and community involvement. Maya's school had recognized her leadership abilities and appointed her to the student council, where she had championed initiatives to make school events more inclusive and welcoming for students from diverse backgrounds. Her approach to student government reflected the same principles she had demonstrated at Victoria's wedding: identifying problems clearly, proposing solutions based on love and inclusion, and working persistently to create positive change. One of Maya's most successful student council projects had been organizing a multicultural art exhibition where students could display artwork that reflected their family heritage and cultural traditions. The exhibition had been so popular and educationally valuable that it had become an annual school tradition, with Maya's initial vision expanding into a community-wide celebration that brought families together across cultural and economic differences. The success of the multicultural art exhibition had led to Maya being invited to speak at a regional conference for educators about student-led initiatives that promoted inclusion and understanding. Her presentation had focused on how young people could use their unique perspectives and creative abilities to identify and address problems that adults might not recognize or prioritize. Maya's message at the education conference had resonated with teachers and administrators from across Southern California, leading to invitations for her to consult with other schools about developing similar programs. The recognition had been exciting, but Maya had remained grounded about her role, consistently emphasizing that positive change required collaboration and community support rather than individual heroism. The financial stability that had grown from my expanded design business had allowed us to move to a larger apartment in a better neighborhood. providing Maya with her own art studio space where she could work on larger projects and experiment, with different mediums without space constraints. The studio had become a gathering place for Maya's friends and collaborators, creating an environment where young artists could support each other's creative development. Maya had used her studio space to mentor younger children who showed interest in art, offering free lessons and encouragement to kids whose families couldn't afford formal instruction. Her teaching approach reflected the same generosity and patience that Professor Martinez had shown her, creating a positive cycle of artistic education and community support. The mentoring work had connected Maya with families throughout our neighborhood, establishing relationships that enriched our social network and created opportunities for mutual support and friendship. Maya's reputation as a talented and generous young artist had made her something of a local celebrity, with parents frequently asking for her input on their children's creative projects and artistic education. As Maya's 12th birthday approached, Victoria had proposed organizing a celebration that would honor not just the milestone birthday, but Maya's growing reputation as a young artist and community leader. The party planning had become a family project, with everyone contributing ideas and resources to create an event that would be meaningful for Maya, while also celebrating the family relationships that had been strengthened through her courage and wisdom. The birthday celebration had been held at the community center where Maya took her advanced art classes, with Professor Martinez helping to coordinate an exhibition of Maya's work from the past 2 years. Friends from school, fellow artists from the summer program, family members, and community supporters had gathered to celebrate Maya's achievements and the positive impact her art and advocacy were having on the people around her. Victoria had commissioned a professional photographer to document the celebration, ensuring that Maya would have beautiful memories of the day when her family and community came together to honor her talents and contributions. The photographs had captured not just the joy of the celebration, but the depth of relationships that had grown from Maya's initial act of courage at Victoria's wedding. During the birthday celebration, Maya had unveiled her latest major work, a large canvas, painting titled "Family Trees Grow in All Directions." The piece showed various family structures connected by flowing branches and roots, illustrating her understanding that families could be biological, chosen, or created through shared values and mutual support. The painting had included subtle references to our own family's journey, with small figures that represented key moments in our healing process, including a tiny representation of a child holding a poster and standing before adults at what was clearly meant to be a wedding celebration. The inclusion was gentle and symbolic rather than literal, showing Maya's artistic maturity in addressing personal experiences through universal themes. The response to Maya's birthday exhibition had been overwhelming, with several visitors expressing interest in purchasing her work or commissioning pieces for their homes and offices. Maya had been flattered by the commercial interest, but had chosen to donate several pieces to the community center and local schools, prioritizing the educational and inspirational value of her art over financial gain. As I watched Maya navigate the attention and opportunities that were growing around her artistic career, I continued to be amazed by her wisdom and grounded perspective. The confidence she had gained from successfully advocating for our family had never transformed into arrogance or entitlement, instead developing into a deep sense of responsibility for using her talents to benefit others. The story of Maya's intervention at Victoria's wedding had become something of a legend within our extended community, often shared as an example of how young people could create positive change through courage, creativity, and unwavering commitment to their values. But Maya had never allowed the attention to distract her from the ongoing work of maintaining the relationships she had fought to preserve and continuing to grow as both an artist and a person. Looking toward the future, Maya had begun expressing interest in eventually studying art therapy, inspired by her own experience of using creativity to heal family relationships and address social problems. The career direction seemed like a natural evolution of her talents and values, combining her artistic abilities with her instinct for helping others work through complex emotions and relationships. As Maya entered her teenage years, I felt confident, that the foundation of courage, creativity, and family loyalty she had established would continue to guide her through whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead. The little girl who had created a poster about why families should stay together had grown into a young woman who understood that love required action, that injustice demanded response, and that art could be a powerful tool for creating the kind of world she wanted to live in. The journey that had begun with the painful discovery of Victoria's wedding invitation had transformed into a story of healing, growth, and the power of one person's courage to create positive change that rippled far beyond the original situation. Maya's lesson about family loyalty and unconditional love had become a blueprint for how our entire family approached relationships and challenges, creating a legacy that would influence generations to come. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.